grocery stores are also a symptom of this broken food system. Grocery stores are primarily set up to sell highly processed food that, for the most part, is not good for us.
Absolutely.
And in fact, if you look at the way grocery stores are set up, around the perimeter on the outside aisles is where the whole foods are located, the breads, the meats, the eggs, the dairy, the produce.
Yes.
It's those inside aisles that have all this highly processed food, which is where the majority of the money is made. And so grocery stores, traditional grocery stores, are set up to sell those things to us that are, for the most part, not really good for us. So that's another problem with that definition that Mari Gallagher advanced of food desert, because again, it presupposes that the answer to that is having more of these national grocery stores.
I see. So we sort of celebrated when we saw a really popular grocery store chain come into the city. It looked like, that meant that Detroit was advancing. And, we kind of jumped on the opportunity to shop there. But it seems that we have the situation where Detroit is being left behind while Detroit moves forward. Like, there are two Detroits.
There's two Detroit, no question about it.
Right. So,
So clearly we have downtown, so-called Midtown, Indian Village, North Corktown. Those are the areas that are being highly gentrified, where lots and lots of young whites are moving. There's all kinds of capital being poured into those areas. And then we have the rest of Detroit, where the rest of us live. And that's being left to languish, at least at this point. I'm hearing a buzz in some of the city leadership, the new head of the planning department, and other people, that they want to focus on the neighborhoods, and I hope that's true. But right now, what you're saying is absolutely correct, that there are two Detroits. And one of the reasons for that is because most of the elected and appointed leadership is stuck in this old paradigm that suggests that if you develop wealthier areas and you have large-scale development, that somehow that wealth will trickle down to the rest of us. I've seen no case historically that that's true, and
Right.
I have no expectation that that's going to happen in Detroit. We favor bottom-up development from the communities at the grassroots level up. And so on that same note, I'll say this: the Detroit Black Community Food Security Network is developing a cooperative grocery store that will sell healthy foods in the North End. And we really want to get people on board with that. It's a huge project, and I can't say exactly where it's going to be located. We're negotiating now on a couple of pieces of land on Woodward Avenue in the North End, which is just adjacent to Highland Park. And the thing about a cooperative grocery store is the members of the co-op are the owners of it. And so the grocery stores that we have in our community now, even the new ones that you mentioned that opened up, which on some level, I'm not going to say it's all bad, because the new stores did provide more access to people who perhaps didn't have it.
Absolutely.
But the problem with most of the stores in our community is they operate on an extractive basis. In fact, they're what I call wealth extraction stations. They set up a business that's not owned by the people in the community. They extract the profits from those businesses, and they go usually outside of the city of Detroit. And so we see very little benefit in our community in terms of ownership, in terms of job creation, or in terms of community empowerment. So those are some of the characteristics of what happens inside of a capitalist system. So our organization, Detroit Black Community Food Security Network, number one, is opposed to capitalism. We think it needs to be gotten rid of, and we need to replace it with a system that fosters equity in terms of economics. But in the meantime, we think that co-ops are the best option that we have to galvanize our collective strength, galvanize and aggregate our collective buying power, so that we can be owners of the businesses that sell food in our community and not just consumers. So the co-op we're developing is called the Detroit People's Food Co-op, and if people are interested in more information on that, they can call our office at 313-345-3663. Again, that's 313-345-3663.
Okay, and we're going to make sure that we also have that information on the Think Tank Facebook page, in case anyone did not have their pen and paper out. So again, that was 313-345-3663. And while we're here, I want to make sure that we do open up the phone lines in case there are any questions or comments that anyone might have for Baba Malik Yakini. And I also wanted to know, somebody actually brought this up to me. It seems like you've made a lot of transformations and transitions throughout your life as an activist. And the question was, what led you to this particular branch of activism?
Well, let me say that, first of all, I see it as all being parts of a whole.
Okay.
So I'm a black nationalist, I'm a Pan
Mm-hmm.
Africanist, and everything I do is geared towards building a sense of peoplehood in our community, building a sense of self reliance, and breaking this sense of dependence that we have on other people.
Period.
And so
Okay.
I've been involved in various ways of doing that. And
Mm-hmm.
so for many years, I was the director of Ensordoma Institute, one of the African-centered schools in Detroit.
Mm-hmm.
And in about 1999, we started doing pretty serious gardening with the children at the school.
Mm-hmm.
And so that kept developing and developing and developing. So it went from having a school garden to something that we call the Shamba Organic Garden Collective. And eventually that grew into the Detroit Black Community Food Security Network. And as my
Mm-hmm.
passion for the food work grew, I decided to transition from being director of the school to being director of the Detroit Black Community Food Security Network. But again, they're all parts of a whole. And so, I don't want to advance the idea that urban agriculture is more important than building African-centered schools, because both are equally as important. We need all of those
Mm-hmm.
things, as well as many more aspects of development in our community, and we need to find a way to link all those things together in a meaningful way. So, but
Mm-hmm.
specifically, as my passion for this food work grew,
Mm-hmm.
and after having done education for many years, I
Mm-hmm.
began to shift my emphasis more to the food work and to put less time into education, although I will always be an African-centered educator, and I'm working actively to continue to build and revive African-centered educational institutions.
Absolutely. I was going to say it's impossible, really, for you to put less time into education. What are you doing
Yeah,
now?
yeah, and well, I mean,
Yeah.
what we're doing with Detroit Black Community Food Security Network is still, it's educational work. It's just not in a classroom. It's not situated
Mhm.
in a building all the time. One thing I didn't mention is we have a
Mhm.
farm. Well, you mentioned D-Town Farm earlier.
Mhm.
So D-Town Farm is a 7-acre farm in Rouge Park
Mhm.
on West Dollar Drive between Plymouth and Chicago. And so we do
Mhm.
lots and lots of educational programs at the farm. And so it's really an educational institution as well as a production farm. So really the work,
Mhm.
the educational work hasn't stopped, it's just kind of shifted. But we're
Exactly.
still pushing the same concepts that we pushed at Ensordoma Institute and the other African-centered schools.
Mhm. So you mentioned D-Town Farm, which is, you didn't say that it was beautiful. It is the most beautiful thing that you will ever see in Detroit.
We have the creator to thank for that.
Absolutely. But you have some events coming up
We
at
do.
D-Town Farm.
So we have a couple of events. One is actually at the farm, which is our first annual Children's Day, which is on Saturday, August 8th, from 10 a.m. until 2 p.m. And this is for children between the ages of 5 and 12. And so we have a variety of activities planned that give children kind of a taste of agriculture. We have a composting workshop, a beekeeping workshop. We have a wild herb, edible herb workshop where Sister Fee, who is an herbalist who recently moved to Detroit, will be taking the children on an herb walk, collecting samples. They'll be pressing those herbs in a book so they can actually see what they look like and learn about many of the medicines and the foods that are growing all around us that we commonly call weeds.
Oh, that's
So,
perfect.
and then we'll have plenty of fun activities. There'll be a
Mhm.
scavenger hunt and refreshments for children. In fact, we're asking people to bring a lunch and to bring
Mhm.
something to share because we're making this a community event.
All
So again,
right.
that's on Saturday,
Mhm.
August the 8th from 10 a.m. until 2 p.m. at D-Town Farm, Children's Day. And then we have a lecture series also, which is not at the farm specifically,
Mhm.
but it's sponsored by the Detroit Black Community Food Security Network, and it's called the What's for Dinner lecture series. And this year that occurs at the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History. And so we have 4 lectures every year, every other month between April and October. And so our third lecture of the year is coming up on Saturday, August 15th. And this is really going to be happening during the African World Festival. And so it's going to be incorporated into the African World Festival. And this lecture will be by Brother Naeem Edwards, and it's entitled Paradigms in Sustainable Food Systems. He
Mhm.
recently traveled to Cuba,
Okay.
which is really held up as kind of the icon of sustainable agriculture. When the Soviet Union collapsed, which was the main benefactor for Cuba, they no longer had this external support, and they had to figure out how to produce their own food. And so they've done a tremendous job at developing agricultural co-ops and organic farms in Cuba, and doing a lot with urban agriculture. In fact, in
Okay.
Havana, the capital city, they're producing about 80% of the food that's consumed in Havana. And so we really look at that as a tremendous example. So Brother Naeem will be talking about the parallels between the food system in Detroit and Cuba, and looking at the lessons that can be learned by each side from the other. And so that's on Saturday, August the 15th from 2 o'clock until 4 o'clock at the Charles H. Wright Museum of African American History. And then our biggest event of the year is at D-Town Farm, and that's on September 19th and 20th, and that's going to be our 9th annual Harvest Festival. So that's a 2-day event where we have live music, we have speakers. In fact, this year we have a brother named DJ Cavum, and if people
Okay.
are not familiar with him, they should look him up on YouTube. Brother's Off the Hook. So he's a hip hop artist who does lots and lots of music that's related to food and nutrition and
Okay,
justice.
yes.
DJ Cavum, put that name in your mind. He's off the hook. He's going to be closing out the festival on Sunday the 20th.
DJ, spell
DJ
that.
DJ Cavum, Cavem. And interestingly, DJ
Okay.
Cavum's mother is from Detroit, although he lives in Denver,
Okay.
but his mother's from Detroit, so he has much love for Detroit. So he'll be coming here, and we have lots of other entertainment. We have what we call learn shops, where people
Okay.
in a 50-minute session can learn various aspects of farming, and again, there'll be opportunities to learn about beekeeping, about herbal medicine, and various other aspects of farming. So it's a really wonderful event. We have vendors, we have food. It's a community event. Last year we had 700 people that attended over the 2 days, and we had rain both days. So we're expecting
Wow.
to have many more people than that this year.
Okay. So why all the enthusiasm, you think? People are responding,
Well,
really.
it's coming. It's been a lot of work, and it's not just our organization. There's many organizations doing this food work in the city of Detroit, but we've been working diligently. And then also, there seems to be more interest nationally and internationally around people controlling their own food. There seems to be a new consciousness kind of sweeping the globe, where people are pushing back against corporate control on many levels, and wanting to have communities that control themselves, and
That are
and
self-reliant.
practice more democracy and more equity. And so food is one of the ways to make that happen. And so we're seeing throughout the world much more interest in that. And because of much of the groundwork that's been laid by some of the pioneers here in Detroit, many people now are taking an interest in it. I want to just tell you a short story. There's a brother who I'm not going to mention his name, who's been a friend of mine for many years. And he used to come and just kind of talk to me sometimes while I was working in my backyard garden. And he would just look, and he never helped, but he would just kind of watch me while I was working. And one day a few years ago, I was in Atlanta speaking at a conference, and he called me. And he said, I was at the supermarket a few minutes ago, and I went to buy some tomatoes, and I thought to myself, Malik doesn't buy tomatoes. And then he said he went to buy some greens, and he thought, Malik doesn't buy greens. And so for many people, the way it hits them is in their pocketbook. They're seeing the economic sense that it makes, how we can reduce the amount of money that's leaving our pockets by growing our own food. And then also many people are seeing a way to generate income. Because if you do a garden, I can assure you, there's no way that you can consume all of the food that you grow in your
It's
garden.
true.
So it forces you either to sell some, or to give some away, or to learn how to can the food to preserve it so that you can have it. Because it's just, when you grow a garden, if you do it correctly, there's just an abundance of food. And
Absolutely. And
so,
you'll be calling your friends, come get some of these tomatoes.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So for many people, that's one of the reasons people are starting to get into it also. They're seeing how much sense it makes in terms of economics, as people are trying to look at how to meet expenses which are higher, with income which is often less than it used to be.
Okay. Started thinking about tomatoes. So you actually already addressed, I wanted to know about beekeeping. I see that this is Detroit.
Yes.
I hadn't heard of anybody doing beekeeping in the city before, but recently, in the last few years, I've heard of a few different, are they bee farms? And
Not really
why do
bee
we need?
farms, but so beekeeping, we call beekeeping apiaries. So there's many
Okay.
apiaries around the city of Detroit. In fact, there's a collective called Sweet on Detroit where many of the beekeepers are working together and learning together and purchasing supplies collectively. But beekeeping is very important, and it's an ancient tradition. In fact, some of the best beekeeping is done in East Africa, in Ethiopia,
Okay.
and in ancient Egypt, in fact, ancient Kemet, they used to keep bees and produce honey.
Right.
So beekeeping is important for two main reasons.
Mhm.
One, many of the crops that we eat, any crop that has a flower, like
Mhm.
beans and squash and tomatoes, have
Okay.
to be pollinated. You know, if you
Mhm.
go back to elementary school, to your biology class, you might remember every flower has a male part and a female part.
Mhm.
And so what happens when the bees fly from flower to flower, and they're attracted, the reason plants have flowers is to attract insects, right?
Mhm.
Because they look pretty.
Right.
And so the insects are attracted to the colors. They land in the flower, and when they land in the flower, some of the pollen gets stuck on the in the hairs on their legs. Then when
Mhm.
they fly to the next flower, some of
Right.
that pollen goes on the female part of that plant, and
Mhm.
it causes the plant to be able to produce fruit. And so human beings are totally dependent upon bees and other insects for the pollination of crops. The reality is that we couldn't have, we would die. We wouldn't have food if it weren't for insects. And so,
Mhm.
you know, a lot of times we have this anthrocentric view of the world. We think human beings are like the best thing and the
Everything.
greatest everything, right?
Mhm.
But the reality is we're part of this matrix of life, and we
Right.
are no greater than a bee. And in fact, we're totally dependent upon bees and other insects, and
Mhm.
so we have to respect them. So that's one of the reasons why we raise bees. The other reason is because bees produce honey. And
Mhm.
so the bees are actually producing honey for themselves. They're producing food for themselves. And what
Okay.
we do is we try to get the bees to produce an abundance, so then we
Mhm.
take part of what they produce and we leave enough to make sure they have enough to survive themselves.
Okay. So, environmentally, or as far as the ecosystem, what's going on with bees?
There's something called colony collapse disorder, which is
Okay.
affecting bees throughout the Western Hemisphere. And there's a
Mhm.
couple of main theories about why that's happening. So lots of beehives are dying out, or the group of bees is often called a colony. I'm
Mhm.
pushing back against that term, really, and trying to get beekeepers to think about creating another term, because the
Mhm.
word colony actually comes from Christopher Columbus's name. So, you know,
Mhm.
there was actually no person named Christopher Columbus. There was a guy
Cristobal
named
Cologne.
Cristobal Colon. And so
Mhm.
the word colony comes from Cologne,
Cologne.
from his name. And so even this kind of imperialism, this European imperialism, infects the language that we use in regard to insects. And
Hmm.
so currently people are calling this group of bees a colony. Again, I'm pushing back against
Okay.
that. So they call this colony collapse disorder. So
Okay.
many so-called colonies of bees are dying,
Mm.
and the two main theories about why these colonies are collapsing is the pesticides, again, that are used in commercial industrial agriculture, and
Mhm.
also the huge number of electronic frequencies in the atmosphere as a result of the increased use of cell phones and other electronic devices. And so, you know, really, we often don't think critically and long range about how some of this technology affects the environment. We're always thinking about just right now, right now, right
Mhm.
now. It makes things more convenient for us,
Mhm.
but we really don't know how this affects insects and the other animals. And we're not, because we're not thinking in a holistic way, we don't
Mhm.
think about how the impact on insects has an impact on human life as well.
Exactly.
You know what I found so beautiful about that whole illustration is that is what is called African consciousness. See, when we think about being conscious, or we think of Afrocentricity, or whatever you want to call it, when we looking back to the Mother Africa, and we're looking at the consciousness of our ancient divine forefathers, we have to realize that you can't have a concept. You can have a concept of God, but you can't have a complete concept of God without adding the concept of the science in nature, Mother Nature. If you don't add that to your concept of God and or religion, then your equilibrium is off because you're not dependent upon the whole of the 360. You're only dependent upon parts of the 360, and therein the equilibrium of our spirituality is off. People don't understand that out in our spiritual existence. We communicate with nature, and nature communicates with us if we are educated to understand, or if that eye is open in order for us to understand the language of nature, the spiritual vibration of nature, and everything that you're talking about is introducing the neophyte back into the true vibration of what is God and who she is and or her. Because when you look at the androgynous aspect of God, you cannot just focus on the masculine God, God, God is he, and don't understand that you can't have anything else without the feminine aspect of God. And therein, you have to pay attention to the ecosystem, because within the ecosystem, everything is sucking from the breast of the mother of God, which is the earth. And therefore, you have the plants, and you have the insects, and then you have the beast, and you have even the human being in this physical tomb that we dwell in called the flesh. So this is getting back to our spiritual base. And when you get back to nature and learning what holoculture is about, or learning how to plant seeds and preserve seeds and to reproduce seeds, and even how to clone seeds and turn them into new fruits, or to take the lemon and the orange, for example, and to create what is called a grapefruit. We are the ones who mastered this. We are the ones who introduced humanity to this science. And this science is all a part of religion. And religion within itself is nothing but an institution. But what's inside the institution of religion is spirituality. So this is your spirituality. Get back to the essence of your spirituality, and you will have the whole of it. And you must get back to growing your own food, or else we will continue to kill ourselves off through these pesticides, through this artificial food, through this these genetic modified engineered foods that we have out here that they call beef and they chicken and all this other stuff. The chemicals that they're feeding inside of the beef, or in the cow, and in the chicken, and in the turkey, is what's actually going into the system of the African or the Asiatic man and woman in the world, and it's what's killing off the pancreas and what's causing high blood pressure and hypertension, etc. So we must get back to the importance of herbalistic living. So I just wanted to applaud you for taking the time to come on the show, brother Malik Yakini, and to teach the people the importance of horticulture, and to teach the people the importance of getting back to the essence of us as a people. And we can't say that we're conscious people and we're not connected to earth. We're not connected to growing our own food. We're not connected to farming. This is what preserved civilizations for eons, and this is what is preserving, or that is where we are subservient to the control, the people who control our food industries. We got to understand that we are slaves to them, and we are dependent upon them, because at any given time they can cut us off, because the seeds in which you're getting out of the certain places that you buying these seeds from, once you grow these particular vegetables, some of them you can't even reproduce from the seeds because they're modified. And our brothers and sisters need to know that, and need to know how to circumvent that particular enslavement so that we can continue to be free again. So once again, I applaud you and salute you for taking the time and coming on the show to educate the people. I need
thank you, brother. And
donate.
I agree with everything you just said. If I can just build on the last point you made, what he's talking about is called Terminator seeds, and companies like Monsanto produce those, where normally if you grow a tomato and you harvest the tomato and you keep the seeds, you can plant those seeds the next year and another tomato plant will grow. Well, these demons have they've done a couple things. One, they've been able to patent seeds, which is a deep concept if you think about somebody being able to patent a life form. And then what they've been able to do is create these Terminator seeds that don't reproduce, and then they have investigators who sue other farmers if
If they blow into
Yeah, if
their
if
crop.
those crops, if the seeds, are well, both the terminated seeds and also GMO seeds, if their seeds blow into another farmer's field and that crop begins to grow, then they're suing those farmers, and it's creating control all across the globe. In fact, this is maybe the most insidious form of control that we've seen affect the planet. But thank you, brother. I agree
That's
with
right.
everything I heard you say.
That's right. And I need people to start donating their times to the program that you have and start coming inside the prisons and talking to these young men and women because they also are learning horticulture. This is a trade in every prison in the state of Michigan. They plant peppers and onions and cucumbers, etc. right here in the state of Michigan at every prison. So if we don't, brothers and sisters want to know where they fit in. So if they want to come home and they want to get in where they fit in. But if they don't know where they fit in, they can't get in. And these brothers and sisters love every year when it's time to plant them seeds in the ground and they can get out there because they find that freedom. They find that spirituality and watching that seed turn into something. And it's the same with a person who is a teacher. They plant those seeds of education or knowledge within the human being, and they love to see it turn into something successful, or prosperous. And it's the same with brothers and sisters who go out there and plant seeds in the urban gardens throughout the Brightmoor and River Rouge district.